We ready?
Willing and able.
I will call this meeting of the Electoral Board to order. If you would all please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance and remain standing for a moment of silence. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. So welcome to this meeting on this beautiful day, and it's still August. And so the first item of business on today's agenda is approval of the minutes of our previous meetings.
Mr. Chairman, we have 2 minutes here. They have been previously circulated among the board members, and they have been corrected. Any recommended corrections have been added. We have the board meeting minutes for July 9, 2024, the regular meeting, and also the meeting for July 22nd, which was a special emergency meeting for evaluating the annual evaluation of the General Register. These have been circulated, and I move that they be received into evidence. Approved, I should say.
I second.
Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Passes unanimously. All right, thank you for doing those, London. Next is a report from Electoral Board members. Mark, do you have anything?
Nothing to report.
Okay. London?
Mr. Chairman, very briefly, I just have one thing I'd like to mention. We are approaching a very important election season, and for, I guess some would call it historic. We are concerned about cheating, and early voting will begin very soon. So I would advise that all concerned citizens vote early if you want to be sure that your vote is not stolen. I always vote on the first day of early voting, or at least the first week. If your vote is registered in the poll book, our very competent staff here will guard it for you so no one can come in later and vote in your name. Our governor, Glenn Youngkin, has issued an executive order number 35-2024, which was signed on August the 7th, 2024, which the General Register has assured me that we are fully in compliance with. And I'd also like to highlight a federal law, a U.S. Code section 18 U.S. Code section 611, that makes it virtually impossible to prosecute or to get a conviction on a non-citizen voting in the election. Read the law for yourself and you'll see that not only 9/11, but 6/11 is going to be in U.S. history, because it's virtually impossible to convict anyone of voting as a non-citizen based on that law, because all they have to do is say, I thought I was a citizen, and that's enough for the law to, no prosecutor will take that case anyway. So I'd just like to bring up those 2 points early on this morning.
Okay, thank you. And I would like to also note for the record, so the executive order that the governor issued went down all of the steps, all of the requirements in the Virginia Code that work to preserve a full and accurate and transparent process, including paper ballots. And apparently there are some people who had not found out or not heard that we use paper ballots in Virginia now. Training for all the election officers, using voter equipment that is certified by the state, that is programmed by the local election officials before every election, and is not connected to the internet, to any other machines. I would note that all of those things that were outlined in the governor's executive order are all things that have been on the code, on the books in Virginia for a number of years. We've gone through several election cycles. The 2020 election, where Joe Biden won significantly in Prince William County. The 2021 election cycle, same equipment, same code provisions, same laws, and Glenn Youngkin was elected as governor. So while the executive order is good to highlight for what we need to do to make sure that the votes are fair and accurate and transparent, the only thing that was new in that executive order was the requirement that the commissioner of elections certify to the governor that all of the jurisdictions in Virginia are following the code, which makes sense. But I want everyone to understand that all those things that were outlined in the governor's executive order were things that have been approved by the General Assembly, signed by several governors, and have been on the books for several years. So presidential elections bring out, a lot of hoopla and misinformation, disinformation. And what I have told Virginia voters in every presidential election, don't pay attention to what's going on in Georgia or Wisconsin or Arizona or anywhere else. When it comes to the things that we can control here in Virginia, we can be assured that the elections are fair and open and honest. So if you have questions about the process, look at what we do in Virginia. Don't pay attention to what's going on in the rest of the country. So with that, we will move to the General Registrar's report.
Good segue. We had, related to that. So I start my report today with talking about our open house event that we had last weekend on Friday and Saturday. We had roughly about 300 people come through. It was really great. We had an overview of it. It happened on August 16th and 17th, roughly 300 attendees. We had a waiting list, which was really great. We weren't able to get everybody off the waiting list, but almost half the people off the waiting list, we were able to find a spot at the last minute. We did get a lot of print and TV media coverage. The EAC actually gave me a call a couple days ago and wanted to find out more about what we did because they thought it was something that should be replicated as a best practice. And NBC4 gave us 2.5 minutes for a news story, which was, that's about the longest election news story of how elections are run that I've seen. So what we did during the open house was we covered each area of the election. So we talked about voter registration, we talked about how we staff election officers, we talked about how we report results. It gave people a view of how we do that process. They came through our office and stopped off at a number of stations throughout that process. So we got really great feedback from people. We are going to do a survey to see kind of what they learned, what they felt like they would have liked to know that they didn't learn, see what their impressions were, see how it changed their views of elections or didn't change their views of elections. But I think most people came away feeling more confident about the process and having a better understanding of how it works. I mean, you go to the polling place on election day and you check in, you get a ballot, you vote it, you put it in the machine and you leave. And as we all know, and the board knows, there are a lot of steps that go into it. Today, you're going to look at that. The next task is our task progress report, where we have 340 tasks that we complete to get the election ready. And there's a lot of subtasks to each of those. And some of those things take weeks of multiple staff working on them just to check that box. So it was a really good day overall. Like I said, great feedback. We got media coverage. We had good VIPs too. The commissioner of elections came by. The county manager was there. We had two supervisors, Vega and Bodie, both came by as well. So it's great for the elected officials to learn more about that process as well. And I think it's something that we'll do again. We're going to be a little busy over the next, 2.5 months here. But I think next year, or sometime early next year, I think would be another chance to do it and bring more people into the process and show them how it works. So it was a really good event overall. Next item on my report is our task progress for the November election. You all have a task progress sheet there that shows where we're at. I mentioned to you all the other day, we have about 20 tasks that are a little behind and 19 that are ahead of pace. So overall, we're right around where we should be. Going to be working to catch up some of those things that are behind and continuing to get ready. This week was everyone in the office, between elections, got some time off to get a refresh before we go into a very busy season. Everyone knows it's all hands on deck from here on out. So as of this Monday, everybody's back from vacation in the office, and we are fully staffed through the rest of the process. So if there are things that are a little behind at this point, that's probably just because people were out of the office, but we do have some things that are well ahead of pace. Our officer manual is already done, printed, reviewed, so that's really great. We're getting our stickers, we're finalizing our sticker order right now, so we have those for the election. And then if the board had any questions about any particular tasks, we're happy to answer those. I think Mark had emailed about a couple things that he wanted to touch on.
No specifics, just.
Okay.
Yeah, nothing specific. Thank you, though.
Okay. I think the only major board item we're going to cover today is the approval of the staffing plan. The officer team is already working on getting the election staffed, but they do need that approval today so that they can make sure that they need to adjust any direction for that and modify. They've been getting assignments ready. But that's probably the last major board item. You all reviewed and approved most of the elements like our ballot order and early voting hours and things like that at the July meeting. So, any other questions or concerns on that?
No concerns from me, no.
No? Okay. All right. Voter registration report. I'm going to hand this over to Natalia Taylor, our Deputy Director of Voter Services. She's going to talk about our voter registration process and where we're at.
I'm going to grab the microphone. Thank you. All right. So we do have a handout with the voter registration report. If you haven't had a chance to grab it, please do so. It explains some more numbers in detail. It also shows comparison to last year. So it's pretty cool information to have. I just want to point a couple things on our voter registration report. First of all, we observe a population growth, which is active voters growth. It went from 292,262 to 292,720. So this is increase in active voters in Prince William County. Another key point from this report is if you look at the charts that provide updates for the voter registration that the voter registration team does, you will see that there is a decrease in transactions, new registrations, and other updates in February, March, and increase in April, July. Just wanted to explain it. February and March, due to closed books, we had the March presidential primary. Also, we had a little decrease in June as well. Again, end of May, June, it's due to dual primary, but not as severe as March and February. And of course, it goes back, the books open in April and July, so we do see increase in transactions as well. Saying that, I also want to point out that there is uptick in transactions overall in July. Of course, state did the confirmation mailing in June, so some of it is due to confirmation mailing, so we do see some new transaction due to that. However, we do see that the third-party organizations and outreach programs that are done during presidential years, we're already receiving those transactions back as well, which is great. So again, one of the points of open house was that we want to make sure our voter rolls are accurate and up to date. So again, that is what we're observing here in our office. We continue following voter maintenance procedures, and with that being said, you will see again in your report that there were several cancellations done. To be specific, it's a little bit over 2,600 voters were canceled due to no longer being here, so they moved out of state or deceased or felony convictions and so forth. So again, following what we're supposed to do and doing what we're supposed to do per Code of Virginia. I mentioned earlier confirmation mailing was sent. We sent it to over 7,000 registered voters who were marked in the system that possibly moved within jurisdiction or out of state. As a result, over 5,700 of those voters were moved in inactive status, and over 800 were canceled because they have moved out of state. So that is the concludes my report. If the board has questions, I'm more than happy to answer. Looks like not.
I don't have any questions.
No questions.
So the number you gave about the number that have been canceled, where does that show up on here?
Right over here on your report, last page, where it says voter cancellations. So moved out of state, 839. We did want to point it out, and 2,600 that I mentioned earlier that were removed from the rolls. That is the total.
I do have a question. Refresh my memory, when does Elect send out, it's twice a year, when do they send out the mailings, what months?
Yeah, so as this year, because we had the March primary and Elect send it in June. I do not know, I don't have information when the second one will go out.
Okay. Yeah, and that's
But
why
it went out in June, yes.
that's why you see the jump in numbers in July because of that mailing.
Yes, because they have, just a reminder, they have 30
why it
days to
jumps up
respond to that mailer. So even though they send it in June, we do not see results like, moving to inactive status or cancellations if, until we receive something from the
Yeah,
voter.
just so for the record, so if you look on this chart here, basically we average about 230 to somewhere in the mid 200s per month removed off the rolls. But in the month of July, because of the June mailing, it jumps up to about 1,000. So the total is about 2,600 for the year.
Yeah.
So that's
Correct.
that was the reason for the question. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Good report.
Anything else? All right, thank you very much.
Okay, last item on my report today is just a organizational progress report. So I will have been here 3 months, a few days after this election, since I started, 1 week after the November election 3 years ago. So this is kind of look at overall kind of where we were, where we are, looking at things that, didn't go as quite as we would have liked them to, and looking at a lot of the progress that we've made during that time. I think it's a good time to review it just before a presidential election. So organizationally, the board did an extensive review and clarification of duties. I think that was a really good thing. We're going to look at that again today during new business. I think it's more extensive look at that than I've seen any board do in my several organizations that I've worked for in elections. So that was really great. We've reorganized the structure. So one of the first things I did when I started here was we redid the structure of our organization. I thought there were a lot of things that didn't make sense. I remember my first couple months, I had people coming to my office all day long, and I thought, I can't do this all by myself. We need a structure that makes sense for the tasks that we have. And I moved us more towards specialists in our office, people that are really dedicated to certain areas, and narrowing people's task lists so that they didn't have these tasks that were kind of all over the board and in different departments, but really becoming experts in their craft and what they do. So we changed the structure, we redid job classifications. We also adopted the performance hiring structure that the county uses, which is a process they have that kind of standardizes hiring and you do literally numeric ratings of new hires, so there's a process there that's more uniform, both in terms of the questions you ask and also how you evaluate your potential new hires. So that's been really great. We added assistant director positions, so Natalia and John, they're at the table here with me. Those didn't really exist as they were when I started. We've added the communications specialist, Thalia. Behind the camera over there was added, so we have communications role. And that has enabled some of the things that I was imagining when I started here, like the sticker contest and the open house and some of these things that I wanted to do. You know, we don't have time to do those without the people in place to do those, without the skills in place to do those things. And we've added a new IT position. We haven't hired that position yet, but we're in that process right now. So hopefully within the next month or two here, we'll be adding that position. That person probably won't be helping us that much with this election in terms of preparation, but it'd be nice to have them in and let them see the whole the whole thing in full flight, so that they can, you know, start thinking about what they would like to contribute to this office. So all of those things, all the stuff that's been accomplished here starts with really the board's direction and our reorganization and making sure that we are equipped and structured in a way that allows us to do those things. Organizationally, we've also exceeded our budget goals. We've been at or under our budget every year. We've reduced the amount of overtime we've needed, which has been good for both allowing us to hire more temps into place to have a larger team. That means people are not as tired when they're doing tasks. That means they're fresher. That means they have a better work-life balance as well. We've improved our procurement review process. There were a lot of issues with that. The county had us on some audit reports from the years before I arrived, and we have not really had any audit issues over the past few years because we're in full compliance with what our procurement process is supposed to be. And it's really critical for our organization because we need to make sure that our contracts are considering things like election security and special things, and we have a really good partnership with both the finance and the procurement team in Prince William County, but also the IT team that reviews a lot of that stuff. When we do a new IT contract, which most of our stuff is related to IT, we go through that process with them, and we have other experts that are able to weigh in on that process as well, and they help us consider things like security and add their expertise to it. That'll get even better once we have our own IT person in-house to work with them. Organizational culture. We've tried to change things up to increase accountability, to increase transparency, to increase the inclusiveness of ideas of the staff. Tried to push for innovation and excellence. You know, I've told staff a few times in internal meetings that when I do things, I don't want to just do things well. I want to be the best at what we do. I want to be the benchmark that people look to. And obviously, we started off in a pretty big hole with a number of lawsuits and challenges in the first year. But we got through those. We made a lot of these changes, and we got to the point where we're at now, where we're having an open house, and we're getting a call from the EAC saying, you guys are doing things that should be considered best practices that other counties should be doing. And I think that the board has added a lot of routine reports and updates to meetings. So if you go to a meeting in other counties, even when I work for Montgomery County, it is not the same structure here. We do a PowerPoint for most meetings. You all have a huge array of preparation materials that you all review prior to each meeting and that we evaluate during meetings. Most meetings that I've been a part of are just, you know, a group of people sitting around a table. We don't typically have an audience, but we have an audience here. So, I mean, that's a good thing in terms of people coming in, contributing their ideas and thoughts to the process. Sometimes they are things that we adopt, sometimes they are not. But I think overall, it just kind of shows where we're at organizationally and the professionalism that we bring to all of our work. Internal measures of this. So the county does a organizational survey, and what we've seen in 2021, we were one of the worst agencies in the county to work for, according to our own employees. Our leadership score was a 25. Our collaboration score was a 27. These were far below the county average, which was 67 at that time. You can see our overall score has gone from 61 to 71 to 82. So we've gone from being one of the worst agencies in the county to being where we should be in the, to meeting the average in the county to exceeding what the county is. And if you look at some of these key areas, and our average score compared to most of the county agencies, we're 18 points higher in collaboration. We're 16 points higher in feedback. We're 23 points higher in leadership. We're 17 points higher in respectful treatment. The one we lag behind, the only category that we were below the county average on is physical safety. And I think that's more of a concern of the political environment we're in. We've taken a lot of steps to improve the security of our office. If you come through our door, it looks very different than it did a while ago. Our doors are all locked. If you're getting into a door, you now have to have a key card. It records who comes in and who goes out. So we've made a lot of improvements to physical safety, but there's only so much we can do with in the environment that we're in. And going back to Keith's comment about misinformation and disinformation, that does affect the physical safety of the staff. So I think us trying to be as transparent as we can to combat some of that and to show people that we have a good process that works will help with that physical safety as well. So a lot of, sometimes these are qualitative things that you take away that have changed, but we have real quantifiable evidence that at least the employees feel like there's a different environment now. So we have had, I don't want this to be a commercial for how great we are. We have had some issues. I know my first week, I mentioned that before, I had to go before the supervisors and talk to them about some issues that we'd had in that election and assure them that it was something that we were going to be working on and improving. We've had a couple problems. We had a special election when Supervisor Weir was elected where we had the ballots that were cut incorrectly by our contractor. They apologized for that, have not had that issue since. We did revise our logic and accuracy process to meet that need so we would be able to anticipate that problem. Thankfully, we were able to kind of minimize the impact of that. It was only a couple hundred voters that were affected, but not a good situation to have your ballots not be able to go through your machines correctly, obviously. We had what we call the bad batch in the office. I think was this last November?
Seems like it.
It's a lot of elections in 3 years here. We've done redistricting in like 8 elections, so they all blur together a little bit. We had one group of a few hundred voters that got the wrong ballot from a data sheet that we sent. So we revised those procedures internally to make sure that didn't happen, had a second check on that process. We haven't had any issues with that since. Oddly enough, that group actually voted at a higher rate than voters overall because they got so many communications. But I said before, and I'll say again, I don't think that's a good strategy for us to try to get turnout up. We want to make sure that we are sending people the right ballot. So, 99.9% of the time, obviously we have, but that batch was not a good one. And result supporting, we had one election where one of our contests didn't export properly in one of the primaries, I believe it was. And so we were able to fix it within about an hour. But, these are all things that you want to make sure are working correctly so that people have confidence in the system. So there have been some growing pains. There have been some, mistakes that have been made. That's been true at all the agencies that I've worked with, and I think we're doing everything we can. Staff is probably tired of hearing me say quality control at this point, but we're building as many systems as we can to make sure that we do have good quality control. So looking at each of our areas, voter registration, continuing to follow the state list maintenance procedures. There's a ton of them. The staff does a really good job with that. We've also had to go back, and there were some records that just needed to be digitized, and we are almost through with that process. That's taken over a year to get those completed, but we're within a couple months of having that wrapped up. So that's just good from a data management standpoint, or for if there's a request or we have to communicate with another jurisdiction about a voter's information. Having all that digitized is very helpful. We've updated our envelopes with instructions, so when voters get a voter registration contact from us, they have information that tells them where to, if you're receiving this and this person no longer lives here, it tells them to return it. So instead of them just toss it in the garbage bin or whatever, it comes back to us, and then we can put that person on notice on our confirmation list. So we've also established a challenge process. I think we've had I don't know, close to 1,000 now? Almost 1,000. I see Terry out there. Her team has done a lot of work, and we've gotten roughly 1,000, challenges and moved those individuals into confirmation, sent them confirmation mailings and moved that process. So what you see at the end of this, and this was surprised me sort of preparing for this meeting, as of January 1, 2022, we had 292,718 active voters. As of August 1st, as of this start of this month, we have 292,720 voters. So 2 additional voters. What you see here is not that Prince William County isn't growing. There was obviously some slowdown during the pandemic in construction and movement that happened across the country. And now we've seen kind of an acceleration of that. You see construction projects around the county picking up. You see people moving in more. And our total number of voters overall has grown. But our number of inactive voters has really grown. Our active voters has been pretty stable, and our inactive has grown. I think what that shows is a staff that's really dedicated to making sure the list is maintained as well as it possibly can be under the laws that we have to follow. So our number of inactive voters have grown, and I imagine a lot of those will come off after we get through a federal election here. Those that have been on there since before 2022 will come off, and then more will come off in 2026. But that's an ongoing process. 10% inactive, somewhere in that range or a little less, is typically what we expect. But it's nice to see the numbers. The numbers show a district, a locality that's maintaining its roles well. On the mail voting front, we improved workspace and security issues by using a mail ballot contractor. So really, space has been a problem in our office. That's not unique to us as a county agency. It's something that the county is dealing with across the county, but it's also a problem that can't resolve itself quickly. You can't just say, hey, we need a new space, and you get a new space within a few months or even a couple years. In the longer term, probably 5-10 years from now, we'll be down in the new building that they're building near McCourt that's going to sort of be the new county government center, but that's only in the sort of drafting phases at this point. The county has the land, but we really had a challenge here with the amount of space, and I know that previously we had ballots, moving around the county, and that can work. You can set up a custody process for that works, but it's not ideal. What's ideal is to have those, stay in one place and be more secure. So that mail ballot contractors not only help with that, but the ballots that people get have much easier instructions. They have fewer envelopes. I know when I first moved to Virginia and saw the system, I was like, what are all these envelopes? And somebody shouldn't need a college degree to send in their mail ballot or be unsure of how to do it. So ours is very straightforward and simple. You fill out the form. We also worked with the state to revise those instructions. So our instructions were the first of their kind, really, in the state for working that way and being both one form that people fill out very easily and just one envelope, and also still protecting that information. I know that Fairfax went through a period where they had that simpler form, but the information was out there for people to see on the back of the envelope, and I don't think most people want their private information out there, especially now that we have things like Social Security numbers and stuff like that on there. So part of that process was also we added a high-speed scanner. I got funding for that, got it approved by the county board. There were only two of the largest 10 jurisdictions in Virginia that didn't have a high-speed scanner, and I really think it's necessary, and it came in really handy when we had a recount. That was one of our arguments, was not only is this better for the accountability of the process and for making the process work with a certain amount of speed, it also helps with recounts. It helps with the results reporting. So now on election night, when it's 7:45, you're seeing generally our absentee and our mail voting are among the first things that get reported. And that's because we have that high-speed scanner, because once we close that down at 7 p.m., Colleen is printing a report and she's getting that to Natalia, and Natalia's entering that by like 7:15, 7:20. And then we're closing down the early voting machines. And instead of having a process where we have to tabulate like 11 different tapes on a spreadsheet, which is just raw with potential issues, we take the drives from those scanners, we load them into the machine, into the high-speed scanner, and we run a report. And so by 7:45 or so, that report is done and entered. So that has improved both the accuracy of our process and And we still check those tapes to make sure. One poor team in Canvas always has to add up all those tapes and make sure they're matching that big report. But it really helps accelerate both the speed of reporting those results, and it also improves the accuracy of them. So we've also improved our cure rate. That used to be around 45%. It's now improved to just a little over 60%, so we're continuing to work on that. We can't control all of that. Sometimes we tell people, hey, you need to send this, form back if you want your ballots to count. They don't always do it, but we have improved the frequency of which we contact them, and we're working to try to continue to improve that. So, on the election officer staffing front, I think I put the first bullet here because this sort of goes, we've talked a lot about parity, and we've had some special considerations like making sure we have Spanish speakers. I think one thing that gets overlooked is we're exceptionally really well prepared every election with enough officers to serve the public. That is not necessarily easy, and it doesn't happen in every jurisdiction. Some places have recruitment issues. Some places aren't prepared with staff that's well trained. We have a very good group of election officers here in Prince William County. We have a staffing team that does a great job working with them, talking with them, communicating with them every election. So shout out to Dina and Rick here. I should go back to, let me give a quick, to Brittany, Erica, and Chris, and our temps that all work on the voter registration team. They do a great job coming into work every day. It's not easy to sit there and do list maintenance day in and day out. They do a fantastic job at it. On the mail voting front, Colleen and Cynthia both lead very large teams of temps in a whole variety of tasks, so they have to really train up those teams, to make sure that they're doing what they're supposed to be doing. It's a difficult task. There has to be transparency to it as well. They're doing things that the public comes to and observes, so they do a fantastic job with that. And on the staffing front, Dina and Rick do an excellent job of communicating over and over again. One of the first things I noticed when I got here was just that our officer communication, that should be a person that's just talking all day long and making a lot of noise, and it was very quiet. Well, it's very noisy in that room now, and that's a good thing. So I hear that constantly. We get good feedback from our officers on that. So it's something that, I think Dina's gotten really good ratings from the officers in the surveys. I don't think she'll be happy until she gets 100% excellent scores. So it's a good attitude to have to go about it. But beyond that general preparedness, we are code compliant, we are party inclusive, we are balanced. We've done massive recruiting efforts over the last couple years, every year really since I've been here. Targeted mailings, encouraging officers to recruit other officers. The board sent out something, London and Mark specifically appealed to the party members to try to get more Republicans involved. I think in every county there's a party that's that's a smaller party in that particular locality, and so it's always hard to get enough people from that party, and we have. So we've made a lot of improvements there, and we're going into this election right at 50-50 with a chief and an assistant chief in every precinct from each party, and officers, and hopefully we'll even have, some backups going to this election. We also have, I think the goal is to have more than 40 precincts that have a Spanish speaker in them to make sure we're compliant with the Justice Department requirement that we now must meet, and we are meeting that. And this is all while, we also lost our database due to some data security issue and had to kind of start over from there. And the team has not only done all these things, but they've done it while working with the company that we were using basically a new product. And that product has gotten so good now in terms of the communications it provides for the public and the ease of which the staff can use it is so much better. So that's where we're at now. Election officer training, I mentioned this before. Here's our manual. So giving props as well. Props to Tommy. Tommy's not here today because I think he's teaching a class. I think today is our first day of training classes. Am I correct on that, John? Yes. Yeah. So we're starting to train our officers. With the board's guidance and with Tommy's hard work, we've modified that program structure. We've added more types of classes. We've added a certification program. We've expanded the training team. I thought Tommy was going to keel over the first election that I was here. It was like, we got to get Tommy some help. So we've added other trainers to that program, which is better for the educational experience and also for Tommy's long-term viability as a human being. We've seen consistent ratings improvements. We have both online and in-person options. So I've really seen an improvement in that. That was one of my first conversations I remember was sitting down with the training team and the staffing team here and just being like, this has to get better, and it has gotten better. So that's been a really big accomplishment. So kudos to Tommy on that process. Bless you, Linda. Election operations. Again, in the category of things that often go unnoticed. Early voting goes off without a hitch every election. We have officers at all of these different sites for every day, and the sites don't have issues and the equipment is up and running. So I got to give, Carol is here today, give her some congratulations and kudos for always running an excellent process there. There aren't issues there. I've seen that be a significant issue in other counties I've been in, and just isn't here. So that's a real credit to Carol. The rest of the election operations team, John, Brian, Sean, all do an outstanding job. I mean, people don't know when that equipment all arrives at the precinct, all the work that goes into making sure it's all the right equipment, making sure the equipment is programmed properly, making sure the logic and accuracy testing has been done, making sure that it's ADA compliant for our voters. So Carol, Brian, Sean, John, and the team that makes all that happen without even needing much, insight or oversight from me. It's outstanding work that they do. We are meeting the expanding demands of facility and security standards, so there's more ADA requirements now. There is a survey we have to do for the state to make sure that we're meeting more than 150 different security standards. We're going to talk about that later today. We talk about that every year. We are expanding logic and accuracy quality control. So we've modified our processes to make sure that we have the best possible system that we can. That took a little time because our manufacturer, our vendor for our ballot scanners had a certain recommended process that they give to people. And that wasn't working for us. So we had to go against what that was to get there. That takes some time, and it was interesting talking to them because, things change in elections, and what is a bigger issue now might not be in 5 years, just like 5 years ago there were different issues than we're seeing now. So you have to change your processes to adapt to those things, and I think we've done that. We've added software so we can build our own ballots. That's been really great. I know that on on election day in June, John was already ahead of schedule and was doing the headers for the November ballot, so he would be ahead of schedule, which was also a testament to the fact that the June election went well enough that in the middle of the day, John could work on something like that. And we've had a lot of equipment operation improvements, so things are running smoother, less issues. The operations team does a lot of stuff that nobody ever sees or knows about, which is sort of a microcosm of our work. If we're doing it well, then nobody knows about it, and that's a good thing. I know in the June election, I was real happy to see on election night all the coverage be about the candidates. That's what we really want. People are voting for them. Thank you to those of you who come to these meetings and are interested in the ins and outs of those process. But as far as the general public goes, if they aren't focused on something that we're doing, then that's probably a good thing. Generally, it means that we've done our job and there haven't been problems. So that is sort of where we're at. Those are all the steps that we've taken to get where we're at over the last 3 years. I'm very, proud of that. It's been a struggle at times, but it's been really rewarding going from where we've been to where we are. Squeezed a little heart surgery in the middle there. So it's been a challenging few years, but I feel like we're rolling into this really important election in a good place, with good systems, with good processes, and ready to take on the challenges of this upcoming election. And ready to see a lot of voters come through, which is always exciting and great.
Let me just second everything that you said about improvements in basically everything. So I can look around at the few staff people that were here in 2020, and I think they would all agree that we are in a position that's 1,000% at least better than we were in 2020 for a whole host of reasons. But I really appreciate everything that you have done, coming in and really revising a lot of the day-to-day operations, the way that the staff people interact with each other, basically, from top to bottom. We are in an incredibly much better position than we were even in 2020, which seems years and years ago. But so and I think the staff people that are here that were there in 2020 would probably agree with that. So thank you, and then all the new people that have been brought on, and I think we have an office here that we can be proud of. So.
I agree, and I think one of the biggest things that was the easiest is we have a lot of really talented, really competent people, and just letting them shine and letting them lead their processes and innovate and make improvements. It makes my job a lot easier. So credit to them.
I would second the chairman's positive comments. High-performing organizations do routine things routinely. They self-assess. They solicit for audits. They increase, not decrease, transparency. And so, kudos to you and the staff. While we're all flawed humans, you have the humility and the humbleness to realize that there is room for improvement. So I appreciate that. When you do in a leadership role, you talk about your staff, not about yourself. So that's also impressive. So really thank you and the General Registrar's team for the good work, and you should be proud of that. We know you are, and we're proud to as a board to represent Prince William County.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. New business, appointment of election officers.
Yep, so we start with appointing election officers. We have 282 new election officers to appoint. Now, we did not get feedback this go-around from the party chairs. We did timely send them the list per the board's recruitment policy, and in that policy, if they don't give any feedback on any rejections, then that is considered to be approval on their part. They could always revise that later if there's a particular person they're concerned about, and they could raise that concern with you all in time. But you all have the list there in front of you for the 282 officers. And just wanted to mention too that this is the part of a total summer recruitment of more than 500 new officers. In addition to that, we reached out to a lot of the officers that are nonpartisan. That was, Dina, was that our largest group as of 2 years ago, nonpartisan officers? So one of the things obviously we're prioritizing, individuals that are with one of the parties to meet the criteria we have to for our party balance. But so we've been trying to reach out to some of those nonpartisan officers, asking them if they would like to represent a party, and then submitting those for approval. The ones you have this week are all new officers, but we did give you about 130 officers last week that had party updates. So overall, about 630 new officers this summer. I feel very prepared for, going into this election. We have more than 2,000 active officers, I believe. Okay, get a nod from Dina, so my numbers are accurate. Yeah, that's right. So more than 2,000 officers, and we're going to continue to push that, and probably the sad part is we'll probably get a lot of applications like within 2 to 3, like a couple weeks before every presidential election, you get a ton that come in. And in, Virginia's process with having to have it go through this review process, we're not gonna be able to include them, but we will communicate with them and we will try to, bring them in the future, to continue that process, so.
So I make a motion that in accordance with the Virginia Code, let's see, it's 24 TAC 2-115, that we approve those 282 new election officers.
Mr. Chairman, I'm happy to say that when the U.S. military is having great difficulty achieving its recruiting goals, the Prince William County Electoral Board has achieved its recruiting goals, so we do a better job than the U.S. military. I second the motion.
All right. So these will be eligible and trained and available to vote for this November.
Yeah.
And how long is the term that they're being appointed for?
It's through the end of the current term, so it would be, I think it ends this year.
Ends this year.
Is that correct? Okay. Yeah, so it's this year. So next year, what we'll do, according to the policy, I believe it's at the start of December, we will send the party chairs the list of all the current active officers and say, here are all the current officers. The board will go to appoint these in, I think it's the February meeting. And if you have any, person you object to on your list, please let us know. So that will have, I think you guys went to 2-year cycles and we do those in the odd years. So next February will be the re-up, so to speak, of all current officers, and the chairs will have an opportunity to review all those officers again.
Okay.
Light work.
All right. So all in favor of motion to approve these officers, say aye.
Aye.
Approved unanimously. Thank you very much. And yeah, this is another example of the vast improvement that we have seen in compliance with the code. And it took us some bumps and a lawsuit or two to get here, but I think when you look at the situation in other counties, I don't know how they comply with the code provision for parity in officers based on the pools that they have. So again, this is one more example of the improvement that we've had significantly since 2020. So
Yeah. I should mention also credit to John, who really put together a list here. When we were doing these recruitment, these aren't just 282 people. These are, laser focused for like precinct 104 needs 2 more Republicans and precinct 703 needs 1 more Democrat. So a lot of these ones are really targeted to fill needs from both parties in locations that we struggle to find them. So this will really make Dina's job easier. And so they've approved them, Dina. You can run out of the room and go and get them assigned. All right. Approval of the November 24 officer staffing plan. So this was just tabled from the last meeting. So you guys had a little more time to review it. And you have a copy of that in front of you. It's the one with green at the top, I guess. Yeah. It's 1,054 officers. Yeah. Just staffing one. So this is about 9 to 12 officers per location. This involves a 3-person leadership team, so the chief, the assistant chief, and then the equipment and provisional specialist that are all go through the certification course, and those officers will have to go through the certification course because that basically runs from, July to the end of June, and then officers have to recertify. This has enough check-in officers so that we match this up with the number of poll books, and then we added 1. So if a precinct has 3 poll books for check-in, we have 4 check-in officers here, so they can rotate throughout the day. So if they are busy, nobody has to forego like a bathroom break or lunch. So we have extra officers to assist. It also includes 3 to 4 officers at each precinct for greeting voters when they come in, for assisting voters at the scanning machine, for helping voters out at the ballot booths and keeping, campaign materials out of there. The team also does a list of backup officers as well. The backup officer program, basically we pay a number of officers to come in, do their training, be ready to go if needed, and they're at home. And if If we don't need them, they get a small stipend for, being available. And if we do, we pay them the full, officer wage for going out to a staffing location. So beyond the 1,054, I know Dina's team will probably start out with like 1,200 officers roughly, or somewhere in that neighborhood, because we expect a certain amount of drop off. And we'll have the backup officers as well. So I think if history is any guide, I would imagine we're going to have a lot of early voters and a lot of male voters this year. So I wouldn't be surprised if half our turnout was, using one of those options, especially with essentially 3 weeks straight of early voting, including weekends outside of one Sunday, at more locations than we've had in the past couple years. But certainly if we don't see that, we want to be ready on election day, and I think this staffs us well for that. So if you all would like to approve that and or modify it.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we approve the staffing plan for the upcoming election as published.
Second motion.
All right, all in favor, say aye. Aye. Passed unanimously. Thank you. Next is ballot verifier.
Okay, so we'll talk a little about ballot verifier today. This is a conversation I had with a company called Savera. Really cool product. I learned about it a few months back. I wanted to follow up to see if it was something we could do. So what is ballot verifier? Ballot verifier is a service that allows localities to take their CVR, which is a cast vote record that is produced by the machines, and the ballot images, and show them side by side. So this provides verification that how the machine scanned each ballot. So, we've seen a number of different questions of the voter rolls or the machines and how they work and that kind of thing. So I thought this was a pretty good way to say, if somebody is saying, well, how do we know the machine counts the ballot correctly? Fair enough.
So just explain what the cast vote record is.
Cast vote record is just a record that shows when, this ballot goes through the machine, here is how those ballots were recorded by the machine. And then, so I'll show them kind of side by side here.
Okay.
That might make it a little easier. So this is an image from Ada County, Idaho, where they would have all the ballots from an election on there. And what you can do is you can click on a ballot, and what's going to show you this, the cast vote record is on the left there. And they actually use the same machines that we do. They use Hart machines also for their ballot scanners. So this is what ours would actually look like. So on the right, you see the image of the ballot. You can see this voter voted for what looks like Josh Cummings and Darlene Hart. And on the left, you can see, sorry, I just got a Charlie horse there. On the left is the record that shows you can see how those categories were voted for, how the machine interpreted those votes. So now what we've seen in our county is we did a recount recently, and it did show that, all of the votes were recorded exactly as they should have been counted. But what this would allow any member of the public to do would be to go in onto our website, for example, and click on one of these images, and then they could go in and they would be able to see how that ballot was counted. So had some conversations with the company. They were very interested in the fact that we put our tapes online. And because they said, ooh, that's a good idea. We might see if we can make that an addendum to our product. So they liked that idea. So it was a good conversation because it was the stuff they're doing, the stuff we've been doing kind of dovetails nicely. So this has been adopted in Ada County, Idaho has this. If you go to their website, you can see all of what I just showed you there from a bunch of different elections recently. Tarrant County in Texas is going to do this in November. They have a couple other counties and states considering this. I think Texas and maybe New Hampshire or Vermont are considering it as a statewide thing. And then they have a couple of localities that are doing it. So I had several meetings with their team. I got a quote. It did get rejected by the state, and I can understand the reason they did. So under 242669 talks about sort of the custody, storage, and inspection of the ballots, and basically says that under the code, the clerk is supposed to store the ballots, and that the authorized use of inspection is only for certain things. So they're outlined in that section of the code, essentially recounts, audits, some order of the court, a risk limiting audit, any of those kind of things. The ballots would be allowed to be inspected. Otherwise, they are to be stored and are the custody of the clerk. So understandable given the provisions in the code. So I think there's some room for interpretation there, though. I think one is that talks about the ballot, but doesn't talk about ballot images specifically. Elect considers those to be the same thing. Legally, are they? I don't know. I don't know that we've had a court decision on that of any kind. 24-2669 talks about the clerk, but doesn't talk about the general registrar. So it talks about the clerk's responsibility. And I think additionally, the legislative intent here, is it about custody? Is it about privacy? Is it about both? So I can see an interpretation of this where someone would say, ballot images are the same as the ballots. No, the general registrar cannot supersede the clerk. And yes, the legislative intent is both the custody and privacy of those ballots. I could also see a court interpreting this and say, ballots and ballot images are not the same thing. There's no harm to the legislative intent of making sure the custody of the ballots is preserved in case there's a recount. And the general registrar is not mentioned specifically in this section of the code. So I think those are kind of questions to be answered. So I think on the positives of this tool generally, I know that I emailed the board about it, and the board was supportive of this and thinks it would be a good thing. The positives, it would provide some confidence in how the machines work. Now, I think we have shown that in other ways, but it's another step. It does allow voters to examine the ballots themselves. You can take a ballot, like I showed you, and go, okay, where did this person fill in the circle? You'd even be able to see ballots where you would see undervotes and overvotes, where maybe someone hadn't done the ballot correctly, things like that, and get a sense of how often that was happening. I also think there's an interesting element of this too. If you're talking about a recount, to a candidate being able to look at this and go, is a recount worth it? Or as they go through, are they seeing lots of issues with how maybe people completed the ballot? Maybe there was some confusion about the instructions that made them need to, anyway, just give them another tool for analysis in that process. So would in my mind probably prevent some recounts from happening, especially because they can be expensive and time consuming, if you can go ahead and get a sense of whether that would actually be useful or not. So in any way, I think this is a progressive step in transparency. Negatives, it costs more than $50K a year, so that's not a small price tag. It's a lot of data to handle. This is a service that's relatively new, so it's not cheap. And we don't specifically have the budget for it, even if Elect had said this was okay to go proceed with. A recount in Prince William County was separated by only 2 last year, and we verified that to the ballot, so clearly our machines are doing their job. So the part of the negative here would be, is this a solution without a problem? Is there really an issue here, or is this just speculation and concern that doesn't really have any actual teeth to it? How widespread is the interest in this? Is this something, I'm sure all the people that are in this room would be very interested in this. How many people outside of this room have an interest in this? And would it alleviate concerns, or would it just be another goalpost pushing thing where you put this and then, someone says, well, how do I know that's the ballot that matches up with the report? How do I know that's the real report? So that's kind of a never-ending thing that can happen with that sometimes. So in terms of action here, I've talked with the board about this. We could proceed forward with it, and I could risk getting sued. I feel like I've been sued enough over the last few years. I think what would make sense is for the chair or the secretary could write a letter asking for an AG's opinion on this, and I think some of the questions of interpretation that we've discussed and that I mentioned in this report are worth examining, and I think it would be good to get something authoritative from the Attorney General on this, because I really do think this is a court matter in terms of interpreting what the code says. And I understand Elect's interpretation. Mine's slightly different, but I can see both interpretations, frankly. And so I think it would be good for the board to pass a motion for somebody to send a letter to the AG to request review of the permissiveness of ballot verifier for use in Virginia. The states that I mentioned that are going forward with this don't really have code provisions that preclude this. And I should mention that in talking with Severa about this, that it was kind of, I don't want to say 50-50, but in asking them what challenges they were running into, they said, well, there's states where there's not really any restrictions to this and they can go ahead. And there are states where there's definitely laws on the books that don't allow this kind of thing. So, and I think we are kind of somewhere in the middle potentially. So, any questions about that?
So this doesn't implicate an individual's privacy, or you can't tie this back to a specific voters, or there's none of those concerns about this.
I mean, I think those are legitimate concerns. I talked with them about that. The metadata that is in those reports doesn't provide, it doesn't timestamp it. So if you had an observer at a polling place that was like, taking notes on who came in when, and then you went back to this, you'd have a really hard time matching up a person to a ballot. And we talked about, we're a pretty large county, so we don't have a lot of small precincts. If you're in a smaller jurisdiction, absolutely some concerns about, really small groups. One of the things we talked about was being able to take some of the smaller groups of precincts. If you had like several small precincts, you could kind of put them all together, redact the precinct number at the top of each of the ballots so that those individuals would have privacy, and instead of having, let's say, 3 groups of 30 voters, you could expand that to a group of 90 voters, and now it's presented on there. They also have redaction, like a post-election, once they've set everything up, the software does some identifiers for sort of extraneous marks so that you could mark out, you could redact parts of the ballot if there was stuff that either identified individuals personally or that wasn't appropriate, but that would kind of be up to the jurisdiction. But I could see a situation where if somebody knew this was a software that might change their behavior, they might mark different things on the ballot. We've also definitely seen ballots where people write in their own name for every one of the write-in contests. So on those ballots, those individuals would be, identified, or you'd need to redact it if you didn't want to identify them in that situation, which, since it's a write-in, and since the write-in threshold is rarely met, that would be a possible solution. So.
And is this creating a third document? You got the CVR and then the actual paper ballot. So what is it that you get from this process? Is it a process comparing the two, or is there another image that's being created that, is subject to FOIA and, those kind of things?
It's just displaying those images on, it would be on our website, for example. It's not, I don't think you're adding another record. If anything, if you get a FOIA about it, one of the things that we've done is move more documents online to make it easier for that kind of stuff. Because we do get FOIAs about, hey, please send us, any materials from a board meeting where this was discussed. And we'll be able to say, all of our board meeting materials are online, feel free to review the videos, look at the supplementary documents that we put on there, all that's on there. That not only does it make it easier for any member of the public that wants to go review that stuff, but it saves us time when we get FOIAs, and it's already there. It prevents some of them from coming in, and when they come in, a lot of them are easier to answer because the information is already, available for the public. So, but this is, we're a larger jurisdiction. A lot of smaller jurisdictions might not be able to afford the price tag for this. They might not have the staff to manage this kind of thing. So I think there are questions to consider here, and further review if it's needed. But I do think that, getting an opinion from the Attorney General, I think would help with that. So,
Mr. Chairman, this is one of the advantages you have when you're GR is a law school graduate. I think he has outlined the issues and he has framed them. I would make a motion that he draft a letter for the signatures of the entire board, the chairman, secretary, and the vice chair be sent to the Attorney General requesting an Attorney General's opinion.
My second.
Okay. Any further discussion?
No.
All right, all in favor say aye. Aye. Okay, passes unanimously. And I assume that, well, I guess that's an issue. Can we get a timely enough response from the Attorney General that we'd be able to use it for this cycle?
I don't think that we'd be able to get an opinion fast enough for use in this cycle. And there's also a budget allocation issue here where, if this was $15,000, I'd squeeze a little money here or there. It's a pretty big chunk of money. This costs as much as our voter guide that's going to go out to all the voters. And there's inarguably that is more valuable to the voters at this point than this tool would be. But it is something that if we are permitted to do it, and the board is, on board with it, I think it would be a great tool to add if we could get, funding for it in the future. So anyway, I will draft something for you all to review, and we can get that off so that maybe not for this election, but for future elections, this would be something that we could, a possible tool for the public to use.
Okay.
Thank you.
Next is review of EBGR duties.
Okay. You all have and we're sent this document. Now, we did a lot of work on this last year. So what I did when I sent this to you all was I highlighted all the ones that were, all the tasks that were GR delegated by the board. Some of these make sense, are pretty commonplace for delegation. The ADA compliance survey is an element. We have 103 locations. If you all want to grab the clipboards and spend a month doing that, we can do that, but I think Brian does a great job with it. And so anyway, I highlighted all the areas that are GR delegated. I did change one that was GR delegated to both GREB. It's on the 5th page. It's item 404. And I wanted to highlight it because it is the polling place changes. The Electoral Board is responsible for reviewing all polling places after each election to determine there will be polling places for the next election that meet the requirements of the Code of Virginia 242-305 to 310. I wanted to change that one because I think this will happen after this election. We know that we have a couple precincts up in the Haymarket area that are really, precincts aren't supposed to have more than 5,000 registered voters. They also, if you have a presidential election and 4,000 voters from the precinct turn out for that election, then you have to split that precinct up.
Is that 4,000 just on election day or 4,000 total?
I think it's just 4,000 total. It doesn't specify. Probably the code was imagined in a time when
Before.
either early voting or mail voting didn't exist or didn't exist like they do now.
Right.
So per the code, I think if we have 4,000 voters in that precinct, and 409 in Haymarket has something like 4,900 voters in it. Now, they're not all active voters, but they could be close. At the very least, for the sake of efficiency and for election day going smoothly, I think there's a couple that we could probably consider for changes. When we redistricted, we tried to keep as many as we could under 4,000 voters. I think we only have about, I want to say 6 or 7 or 8 precincts that have 4,000 or more registered voters, maybe a little more than that. But they're mostly like 4,100 and the low 4,000s. But I know 409 in particular has got 4952, I think was the last count I saw on that one. So they're getting up there both at the 5,000 threshold and the 4,000 turnout threshold. So I wanted to change that one because I think next year we will need to take some actions on that to get go through the process with the county supervisors to possibly change 1 or 2, maybe 3 precincts.
Okay.
To make sure that none of those are getting too large. So. The rest of it is just, I highlighted the ones that were GR delegated.
Good.
And if you guys want to make changes, they're all in there ready to be, we can modify them. But I do know we did a lot of work on this last year, a lot of discussion about this last year too.
I'm good. I make a motion, we approve the list that's published.
Okay.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Passed unanimously.
I think, Lyndon, you have a copy down there with a paper clip up in the top there? Yeah.
Yeah, we'll do that.
So on the last page of that, you guys can keep the stapled copy you have, but the last page of that has a spot for your all signature, so that we have just validation that you all have reviewed it, and we'll publish that online. Yep.
Have you heard from any supervisors about they have an interest in doing this, or this is just you're looking at the numbers?
Just those code requirements, and it's from 24.2, and it goes from 305 to 310. So those code provisions all cover when it's required that you go ahead and make changes. So, and John and I have been talking over the past couple of months and looking at some of those numbers and thinking, well, this is probably going to happen sooner rather than later on a couple of these. And I know when we originally had them, I know there was some stuff in sort of the Haymarket, Gainesville area that we knew, depending on construction growth, it might go higher. And then I know that the precinct that has the courts district that's proposed, I haven't seen any real construction on that start, but I know that's a big proposal for sort of like a multi-use area right off of Minnieville. And I don't know how many, dwellings and
right.
residents that is going to add there. I do know that that's probably the biggest single project right now that's going to expand. But I know the polling place that's there only has a couple thousand voters in it, so we should have room for some, at least at the early stages, and then we'll see how big that project gets. And I don't know what the sort of timelines on that are going forward, but
Yeah.
maybe that's a 2030 redistricting issue that won't be an issue till then. So.
Yeah. One of the other differences between this year and 2020, I don't anticipate that we will have any churches or, private locations telling us not to come back next year. Presidential elections are, different and bigger than everything, and there have been the last several presidential elections. In that specific area, I know we've moved from Bethel Church to the church on Minnieville, and then they said they don't want us there anymore. So, but I think we've got everything in place so that hopefully we won't be a negative burden on any of those locations for serving as polling places.
Yeah, I think, and having if we get a lot of turnout at early voting, that'll really help too. It makes it a lot less, kind of chaotic on election day. So, okay, last item on new business is the ADA survey. You all have a report from staff. We have 3 sites where we need remediation. Those items are outlined in that report. So thanks to Brian for all his preparation on this report and hitting the pavement, going out there and completing surveys and analyzing. Those ADA surveys have a lot of different elements to them, from ramps and obstructions and pathways and things like that. So I see that at 204 Ellis Elementary School, we don't have enough ADA parking spots. We have a ramp issue at 304, and at 316 Potomac Shores Middle School, there's not a curb cut in the sidewalk. Did they just build that school?
Yeah.
I mean, But I don't know why they didn't put a curb cut there, but I think we're looking at the entrance, and depending on which entrance we use, that may or may not be a problem, but you'll see in the report, we have a, temporary solution to remediate the issues at those locations. And we've completed the survey process, per the new state requirements. If you all have any questions or issues, we can discuss, and Brian is here today in case there's a specific, problem you wanted to go over. If not, we just need the plan to be approved, and one that we'll have to sign a compliance confirmation form that he's got over there as well.
I don't have any issues.
Where's the Lillian Carden Community Center? Which?
Town of Monica.
Okay.
There's we did have one other complaint I should mention too. We didn't get many complaints in the ADA department. Did have an issue about the mosque where we received a complaint, but it hasn't shown to be non-compliant in terms of the ADA standards, but there may be something. Anyway, it was one of the supervisors contacted me about it. Brian and I are going to go take another look at the school at the ramp there. So I think it meets the ADA standards, but we may just, need to put some, I don't know, a sign or something just to assist people. I think it might be the pathway that they're taking around the building. Sometimes that'll happen where people will say, well, this isn't ADA compliant. And it's not that it's not compliant, it's that they're going to maybe the wrong side of the building or something like that. So we'll look at that a little further as well and see if that's something that we need to take some kind of corrective action, add a sign, whatever it might be, or notice to the voters in that precinct, something along those lines.
Well, one piece of good news for November, there won't be construction going on in the schools, because I think probably the biggest challenge that I heard about in June was, high schools and, schools everywhere, they were doing construction.
Yeah.
And so the polling place was moved to the back of the building where no one had ever been before. And we didn't have enough signs directing people back. And so I know that the schools are going to be closed on Election Day. No student conferences, any of that kind of stuff. So, and hopefully we'll be back in the regular locations in the buildings where people are used to parking and going to vote.
Yeah, summers are always the challenge with the construction. As soon as those kids leave the school, those construction crews rush in to try to get stuff done in 2.5 months, and it can leave us with some challenges, but usually a little easier on the facility side for the November election. So, and nobody's not aware of the November election. Sometimes the administrative staff might not be aware of a primary that's coming up, but they all know that the November election is coming up, so we don't have any sort of communication issues there. I'm actually going to a meeting tonight with the PWC schools about the calendar for the next couple of years. So talking with their sort of school calendar scheduling team and making sure they're aware of the elections that are coming up. So doing that this evening, actually.
I make a motion, we approve the ADA plan as published.
Second.
Any discussion on the motion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Pass unanimously. All right, so we are now at the point in the agenda for public comment. If there are any individuals that would like to make a comment, 3 minutes, please step up to the podium and identify yourself, and then do we have any, did we have a sign-up sheet? Okay. Do we have anyone that signed up?
Yes, that's right.
So I recognize this name, Mr. Jeff Fuller.
Thank you. That was a great review for me. I've had to miss a number of meetings because of personal considerations, and I'm grateful for the review. I reflect back on my first board meeting a few years ago, and I compare the circumstances I found then with what I see now, and it's night and day. This is a professional operation. And while I don't, because I'm an advocate for election integrity and transparency, my great ideas are not always welcome, and I understand that. But I can look around the room, and every one of your staff, I think that I see here, I've had an interaction with over the last couple of years. And while I might not have gotten the answer I wanted, in every instance I had a professional response. And I congratulate you on that, Eric, and the board. I have a couple good things to say. One is the election officer situation is astonishingly better. I talk with my colleagues who are in the election, the party election integrity business in Northern Virginia, and we're really in good shape. And it's in large part due to Dina, who I know does unbelievable work. But it's also the board who sent out a letter to Republicans saying, please sign up as election officers. And really, I don't think anybody could ask for better support to try to get that balance. And I don't think there's anything about election integrity that's more important than a balance of election officers. It gives confidence to everybody on both sides of the political spectrum. Your early vote plan, big deal, huge difference. Your open house, I'm sorry I couldn't make it. I didn't get on the list in time, and I didn't make the cut, but I thought that was a great idea. The task list you just approved as a modification, great idea, great thing to have that sorted out. The fact that you're now using a single drive for the machines instead of 2 drives, big deal to me. The Karst Institute did a survey, University of Virginia, a couple of years ago on trust in elections. 50% of the people in our state did not trust elections. Now, I'm not saying that's the case in Prince William, but it was also evenly divided between Republicans and Democrats. So that's a telling thing, and that is not acceptable to me as a state, from a state perspective. I don't know what it is in Prince William. I believe it's better than that, and it should be. But one of the reasons for the problem, I think, is any place where there's transparency that can be found, it's good to do it. What you did by posting the results tapes, excellent. Having this meeting recorded, very good. So I encourage anything that you can do that has to do with improving transparency. I'm really attracted, Eric, to that concept you just briefed. I'd like to know more about it. I would be a big supporter in principle of it. Because it answers a lot of questions that are otherwise obscure. What was the voter's intent? Did the machine reflect it accurately? Big deal. I have expressed through our chairman to you guys about the problem of absentee ballot handling outside of the eyes of the election officers or authorized representatives. This is what happens when the ballot comes into your office from the post office and then is fiddled with, reviewed, cured, and then handed off to Colleen for her excellent work at pre-processing. So there's this little black hole in the process. And I understand from your communication back to us that this is your sole authority according to the law, and that you can do what you want to do and you're not going to do what we wanted to do, and I understand that. But I would ask that you try to figure out some way to get eyes on that process of what goes on so that voters can be assured that, hey, there's no black hole over here in the process. I don't have the solution. Obviously, our ideas were not well received, but I would ask you to, look at that again. Drivers' privilege cards. There are 75,000 drivers' privilege cards issued in Virginia in the last couple of years. By definition, in order to receive a card, you have to be a non-citizen, period. So we can show a driver's privilege card to our election officers, and they have to accept it. Basically, they say, we can't use that card, but you can sign this form that says, I am who I am, and then you're good to go. It's an obvious disconnect. And voters don't understand it. I know it's in, the law, but we don't have to like it, and I surely wish there was some way you could figure out around that. I really appreciate the fact you're recording the meeting, but you're not recording the speaker. There's probably a good reason for that, but I don't know what it is. If you go to a school board meeting, the speaker's recorded. If you go to the Racial Social Justice Commission judge, it's recorded. What the hell? Why not record the speaker so that his views, his countenance can be counted, or hers? So those are my thoughts. Thank you very much. I really appreciate what you guys have done. This is a huge improvement in just a couple of years. Obviously, our general registrar is responsible for most of it, but the board as well, and I thank you guys for your service.
Thank you. Anyone else that would like to make a public comment? Going once, twice? I don't see anyone else, so that will close public comment. So we have a couple of items to discuss in closed session. Do we have a motion?
I think we also need to acknowledge Mark. No. This is last week, so.
Do you want to?
Sure. So deviation from the agenda, but just to let the public know, this will be my last meeting as an electoral board member for Prince William County. My family and I are moving to South Carolina here in the next few weeks, so it's been a privilege and an honor. Truly going to miss all the activity, but really appreciate all the great work that the team's done, and just thankful for the great work of the General Registrar, thankful to my fellow board members for their professionalism across the board, and thanks to the citizens of Prince William County for caring and for doing the great work that you're doing by doing your civic responsibility and either being an electoral officer or an advocate, or most importantly, voting. Thank you.
I just wanted to hand this to Mark. This is just a thank you from the staff and thoughts from the staff.
Thank you.
And just wanted to say that Mark has been a really excellent board member, and the work that we did on, I think maybe Mark's first month or two, he came in and we worked on the EBGR duties on like a Saturday, I think it was.
It was, yeah.
And not only is that something that's been good for this county, but that's actually something that we sent around to other counties around the state, that I know that a lot of people have said, oh, this is great, like, having it in a format that's kind of easy to interpret and use. And that was something that Mark pushed, and his wisdom and his contributions to the board have been really outstanding, and I compliment all the board members for, I think there are boards around the state that lean a very partisan way and that maybe make decisions that are related to their party and not related to thinking about the voter populace as a whole. And I think that from the Democrats on our board supporting party parity and really supporting, hey, yeah, we need to recruit Republican officers so we're in compliance, to the Republican members of the board supporting something like Sunday voting and expanded voting hours for voters, knowing that that contributes to all voters. So I applaud all the board members for that, and to say that we will really miss Mark, and he's been a great contributor to our organization, and we thank him so much for his service. We really appreciate it.
Amen.
Yes, I don't have the language, but I motion that we go into closed session per Virginia State Code for some security measures we have to review.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right. All right, thank you all very much.
Thanks.